So hello and welcome to Film Mixology, the place on the internet thingy where detective work happens with carburettors. And case in point, this unit that I'm going to use as an example, but today's episode is going to be about how to diagnose a carb that you have little or no history about. Why? Because really the two examples that you can have about when you're rebuilding at home a carburetor could be either that you have it in your car already and the car starts not working well, or kind of black smoke start coming out of the tailpipe or whatever, and you say, well, hang on a minute, this carb has a problem, and therefore you know exactly the problem that it has, or at least you have an idea of what the problem is before you start. Now what happens where that's not the case? What happens where you just don't know the history of the carb? You just go on the internet, you make a purchase, and you get something like this. So this is a box standard 4160 Holley list 1850 of 600 CFM carbs, and you get it just like this one. Now, in generally speaking, there are two broad categories of why carbs are being sold by vendors. Yeah, so they would all describe it as it is surplus to requirements. I have a graded parts have been gathering dust in my shed for 5 years and that kind of stuff. That may or may not be true. Broadly speaking, there are two options. Number one is that the people think that the carb is not working well when in reality something else. And number two is that the actual carb is at fault. So let's try and work through number one, which is that the carb isn't really at fault. So what happens here? Somebody puts this carb on an engine and the engine doesn't work, but that could be because number one, the engine is worn out or it's faulty. A carb is really not going to fix that. Valve train components are mismatched or worn faulty. A carb isn't going to fix that. The ignition system is incorrectly installed, worn out, faulty, or just kind of Chinesium. A carb isn't going to fix that. And last but not least, the rest of the fuel system is faulty. So the tank, the fuel pump, all the lines, they're not up to standard. They're all dirty. So therefore, whatever carb you put on and you try to run fuel through those lines, it's not going to work. So therefore, any carb that has come from that situation might be a perfectly workable carb. It's just that the person tried to install it in the wrongly, or it just had something else wrong with the engine that didn't allow the carb to perform. Now those, funnily enough, are the best carbs to get, because they are the ones that are going to be easier to rebuild, because they haven't got any inherent problem. You just give it a freshen up, put it back on the engine, and away you go. We're golden. So, and the other one is that the carb evidently had a fault in itself. Yeah, so that could happen also, that the carb was indeed faulty. The person got frustrated, took it off the engine, and then they just put it on sale. So what I'm gonna be going through in this video is I'm gonna go through and try to identify which one of the two is it. So is it a question of this carb that was kind of not very good, and all the steps that I do to try and narrow down which one it is. And the first step that I do, it's always very important when you take a carb out of the box, just as I've done with this one, is do not touch anything in terms of the curb idle screw or anything like that, because that is going to become quite important. I'll show you in a minute. So the first thing you need to do is you need to try and look at the balls here. So if you see kind of a lot of very heavy black soot or very kind of oily deposits, that's probably a bad sign. That could be either the engine, a piston blew up or something, or it could be that the carburetor was indeed running rich. So in this particular case, as you can see probably from there, this is actually quite good, so not a problem so far. The other thing you would always do is you would check that the shafts spin freely, which I can see already that the secondary here is a bit tight, so the spring that it's in the secondary might be quite hard, but basically the shafts spin well. The other thing you need to control, without obviously having touched anything, is the accelerator pump. So this one was correctly set up, but I think if you look here, let me bring a bit closer. I don't know if you can see it here, but basically I think that this accelerator pump is set kind of quite low, and I think you're losing some of the travel from the pump. So that is something that you might need to look at. And the other one, now that we're here, that is very important to do, is try to see what was the position of the transfer slot in comparison to the throttle plates. Now they need to be just sitting. This could be about okay. When you see a situation where the carb is like this and most of the transfer slot is exposed here and here, that tells you that there is a problem with the carb. So it could be that the power valve is blown off or something of the sort. So therefore that's your kind of phase one, which is the outside inspection of the carb and just trying to ascertain, okay, has this unit got any obvious problems, which for the time being it really hasn't on this particular example. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start digging in a bit further into the units to see the fuel bowls and all of the other components of the carb. Okay, so now we've got the carb disassembled, so let's go through all of the checks that you need to do at this stage, and I'm not gonna do them in any particular order, but you need to check all of these things. So number one, is the diaphragm working? So you put it down like this. Yeah, it is working. I mean, the spring is very heavy. I'm gonna have to probably change this because this is insanely heavy. Other thing you need to do is check the base, and actually for corrosion, especially around here, which actually this I mean there is a bit of kind of oily residue around here, but this base is actually pretty good, so I think we're kind of more or less golden here. The power valve, which is this, I always change it. I never reuse power valves anyway, but you might want to check it if you can get a good seal here, and it's basically not hard in any way. It may be okay to be reused. I generally do not. I don't recommend you do, but hey, if money's tight, you can do it. Fuel bolts now. So first thing you need to do is obviously check here. So as you can see, there is a little bit of residue here, a little bit of contamination. It's not great. It's not the worst I've seen by any chance. I know, and also the fuel level was a little bit on the high side if you turn it around. But I would hazard a guess that if I try to take this needle and seat assembly, it will be more or less okay. So let's try and do that now. Yeah, you see. So what you're checking here is the integrity of this O-ring that I'm showing you there. So I think on this case we're okay. One thing to notice though is if you've got any parts missing. Now interestingly, this carb is missing the inlet baffle on the primary. So that's one thing that I'm gonna have to kind of address and put a new inlet baffle here. That's always quite important. And then the other thing that you need to check at this point, obviously once I've taken all the gaskets, I've already this gaskets actually these gaskets are quite noble, so they are coming off relatively easy and quickly, so that's a bonus. And what we're checking here is the jets. Make sure that they are the correct number. This one's at 66, which is, you know, the right jetting for this sort of carb. So I think we're good here. And the other thing, you have to check how many turns does it take to close this. Half, one, a bit less than 1.5. So that's okay. So everything's okay here. Here in the body there's no distortions, at least that I can see of. This gasket seems to be okay. So far, and if I go, the only thing that I can see here is, if you see here, there's a bit of residue there on the bottom of the metering plate. So actually, on this particular carb, apart from that little residue that we've seen at the bottom of the fuel bolts, which are caused again by crud in the fuel system, I think this carb is a really good base. This is probably a really good unit for kind of any rebuild project. This carb should clean up very nicely, relatively easy, straightforward job, and be ready for the road relatively soon. Okay, and just like that, through the magic of YouTube's, as I call it, now you can see this unit that has been completely rebuilt. I put a bit of new needle and seat. The inlet baffle that was missing, I put another one, put a replacement one. I put the light spring on the secondary diaphragm. So now it's gonna, when you put on the gas, the secondaries are gonna come on that little bit faster, which you want. And that's it. Basically, I haven't shown the whole rebuild process, because after we diagnosed what it was, this carb was in really good condition, so therefore it was a pretty straightforward standard rebuild. So there's more Holley content coming on the channel. I want to say really thank you for subscribing to the channel, for your views. If you have any questions, just put it down in the comments. I'll try to respond as quickly as I can. But for the time being, this is going to be it. So I'll see you on the next episode. Thank you.